So my name's Monica, and my pronouns are she, ella. I am a trainer and partnership coordinator with O2O Strategy Group. And we're just going to let y'all know a little bit about us before we get started. So, jumped into live streaming specifically and more intensely in the beginning of the pandemic. It was just something that community members I was working with needed, requested, and wanted to make sure that this is a way that they had access to things that we were like information, support, and a lot of things within the movement. So I'm going to pass it on to Patricia.
Great, thank you. And my name is Patricia. I use she, her pronouns. I'm based in Massachusetts, and I'm a partnership coordinator with O2O Strategies. And what I'm really excited to do is share just some of the tips about live streaming that have been really throughout the pandemic. And really centering leaders at the center of how we do live streams. And so, again, feel free to drop your name, where you're from, and what you're hoping to get out of this session. And we're going to dive into some of um, the basics around live streaming. But first, we're going to share again a little bit more about who we are and the orientation to this digital work that we really have. And so, both Monica and I are here with Online to Offline Strategy Group. And first and foremost, we're a group of organizers. And so that's really the lens that we want to take this whole presentation through. Um, we want to be able to really like step into these digital strategies, utilize them for our organizing, but really have like an organizer first lens in all of these tools and tactics. So when we're thinking about how are we integrating live streams, we don't just want to be thinking about live streams as a tool for like just for promotion, or like how do we pull off this big event just to like say we did this to our funders. We want to really think about live streaming as a tool that helps grow out our base, something that we can train leaders on, something that brings leaders into our movement. And even in all of the steps of planning out a live stream, promoting it, and the follow up that goes in afterwards, thinking about some of these pieces of the organizing pathway throughout it. And so, just again, like trying to think about how are we bridging this world between organizing and digital, and leading with our leaders, thinking about how we can build our base and grow through all of these tools and tactics and making sure they're connected to a deeper strategy. But first, we want to just again hear a little bit from y'all. So feel free to throw into the chat if you've been using live streams these last few months, if you've used them before, and what kind of live streams have y'all really tried out? Any events or anything like that? So I think we're also really excited to learn from each other and have this also be a little bit of a space where we can share creative ideas on how we bring these tools to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Patricia. And I think also there might be moments that you haven't maybe hosted a live stream, but you might have watched one within these past year and a half, right? So just share a few that you've watched, some favorites, and just the ideas that you like. What made it so attractive to you, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about where and how to live stream, best practices, and how to build power with our communities through this tool. And then other ways that you can use this tool and other tools that you can use to use it to its max capacity.
Great. And so first we're going to just kind of go into some of those basics, the ins and outs of a live stream. When we're talking about live streaming, what are we talking about? And the most important thing about live streams is that it really does shift and morph depending on the audience that you have, what you're trying to do, the basis that you're trying to reach, and what is that organizing outcome that you want to have at the end of it. And so, what we're going to focus on a lot in this kind of next hour together is Facebook and Instagram, because those are really the two platforms where the most of our base is likely at. Like, there's about 7 out of 10 folks using Facebook. And so when you're thinking about how can I reach the most amount of people possible, Facebook is often one of those first tools that folks turn to reach that sort of broad audience. But knowing that each of these other platforms, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, TikTok, like all have some sort of live streaming or going live feature, which can really reach your specific base with a specific issue and like be really deeply engaging in a different sort of way. And so this screenshot, if folks remember, there was this moment where AOC was going live on Twitch, playing Among Us with like other members of the squad, and was using this as an opportunity to go live on a very specific platform, doing something like super pop culture, like playing this video game, and talking about different issues. And so thinking about the intersection of like the goals you have, the conversations you want to have, and where you meet folks, where they're actually at, really can help influence the rest of your plan and the rest of your idea. So not everything is going to be cookie cutter. You're going to have the opportunity to like really experiment with live streams, which I think is a really great thing to really think through.
And as Patricia mentioned, right, the two we're going to talk about today are mainly Facebook and Instagram. And so Facebook, one of the reasons, obviously, she said 7 out of 10 people are on Facebook, but 1 in 5 videos is a live stream. So talking about live stream, right? If 1 in 5 videos is a live stream on Facebook, 82% of people prefer to see live streams than read a social post. So that means an article, a carousel, a photo, a graph, right? 82% of people that are on Facebook prefer to see a live stream, prefer to see someone's face and directly engage with them. So we're going to start with Facebook, right? We just talked a little bit about Facebook. We're going to start with Facebook. In order to live stream on Facebook, you have to have an account, and live streams populate on your personal feed, on a page that you manage, or a Facebook group. And so here's an example, right? So this was Mario, and this was the Amazon walkout. And the O2O team supported this walkout with Amazon associates, and people at different facilities were posting and hosting live streams. So Mario facilitated this live stream and gave a first-person account of what was going on the ground, showed people also engaging and protesting, and allowed on his personal feed, right? So there was over thousands of shares of this feed, and just like reached many people within his network and other Amazon associate networks. In order to relate, right? And then also, generally, when you shoot on Facebook, it would be landscape. And so with Facebook, right, another opportunity that you can have on Facebook is RSVP with events. We always want to make sure that when we have these live streams, you want to have an opportunity to follow up with people and engage with people and move them up your engagement ladder. So when you host an event and you connect it to your live stream, when people RSVP, they have there the time, the date, and the link. They have a discussion board that you can actually engage with them. If anybody has any questions, you can follow up and answer any questions they might have. And always make sure to prepare a call to action. When you're having these live streams, you want to make sure you have the petition link ready. When you have the demand that you want, right? You want to make sure you have all these things ready and engage with people in the comments, and even offer polls, right? And Facebook Lives, if you're doing it within the built-in platform, you have the option for polls, questions, and all the other ways that you can to engage your people. So we did a little bit about Facebook, just a little bit about Instagram Live, right? So Instagram Live is done from mobile. There are a lot of multi-platforming platforms, right? Streaming platforms that you can use, but Instagram is all the way mobile, and does not actually link up with those. Technically, you can do it live from a Facebook computer, but you have to have an Android emulator, and it's a little technical. So on an Instagram Live, you can also host this as your page. Some organizations do like features for a day. So sometimes that's sharing credentials or finding other ways to have people on their lives. On these Instagram Lives, it's up to 4 people or 4 guests or 4 pages, right? So if you want to have 2 people on your live, right? But it's only 4 pages that are featured on the live. And you can pin comments. So let's say you have a petition link or you have another way that people can reach you or sign up or newsletters. You can pin that comment with the small link, right? So people can follow up with you, and make sure you engage with the comments. These are folks that are interested. These are folks that are engaged and they want to know more. So engage with the comments. And as you can see, it's portrait. Technically, you can shoot videos away, but best practices would be portrait.
Great. And so just hearing a little bit about some of the very basics of like what is Instagram Live, what is Facebook Live. We're going to dive a little bit more into kind of like the best practices. And as someone who is actually trying to organize these live streams and work with leaders to go through the whole process from like an idea to the actual action, what are some additional best practices to kind of keep in mind? One thing that we really want to emphasize is that sometimes live streams are spur of the moment. You are like at a event, something has happened, you see an elected official, you want to bird dog them, you go live. But sometimes we have the opportunity to plan these live streams out. Even when you're doing an action or an event, making sure that you have talking points prepared, that you have identified speakers, that there's roles available in there, are really useful. And so this is really relevant whether you're doing an online, like a fully remote sort of live stream or presentation, or whether you are like at an in-person action, trying to live stream that too. Thinking about all of these roles in the process and planning have been one of the most successful things for all of the live streams that I've been able to be a part of. And so some of these roles are not just the host, but thinking again about all of the speakers that you're going to have, whether this is an online thing, so you're thinking of what sort of panelists or participants do I want to bring on screen, or whether that is a remote, like in-person live stream, where you're trying to think of, okay, how am I making this dynamic? Training folks to almost interview the participants, who is going to be the voice of this, choosing the right narrator for the live stream, thinking of tech support. Even here at Netroots, there's a tech support person behind the scenes right now that is making sure that our volume levels are good, making sure that in case one of us goes off screen, that the live stream is still staying up. And then thinking also when you're doing live streams on the ground, when you're doing a march or a rally, making sure that your live streamer has a tech support person so that if your march is 3 hours long, there's somebody there to swap out roles with them so that they can continue live streaming while the event is happening, and they don't have to go down to either charge their phone or anything like that. Making sure that there's an agenda. It's great to have like folks who feel comfortable just like going on and talking and sharing their own experiences, but being able to do something like creating a POP, which is the purpose, outcomes, and process for your live stream, whether it's big or whether it's small, can help make the difference and ensure that all of those key pieces, a call to action, follow up, get included. And talking points, I think, are one of the most important things. Whether it is, again, a live stream that's happening, sitting down and talking about this political moment, or whether you're going to be out in the streets live streaming a march or rally, having talking points ready ensures that there's never going to be like a dull or quiet moment. And something that I try to keep in mind is that the average person tuning into a live stream or a Facebook live video, the attention span is under 7 seconds. And so making sure that that average viewership it's usually only 3 or 7 seconds before they decide to keep on scrolling on their feed, you're capturing their attention by repeating talking points, having a clear call to action, letting folks know who, what, where, when, why, all of these things. On the right, you'll see this like kind of example agenda from a national policy update. We were trying to think, okay, we want to be giving policy updates to our childcare providers and parents that we're organizing on Facebook. Folks can't always join a weekly call on Zoom to sit down and listen in for an hour about the ins and outs of where our movement is. As childcare providers and as parents, they're very busy. And so meeting them where they're at and choosing what are the pieces of our weekly meeting we can actually bring to them on the platforms we know they're using and keep it concise and clear and give them the content they really want, which was understanding what's going on right now with the reconciliation package, with funding. And so we decided to just create an agenda and planned out all of the roles needed to pull off this like very clear and concise live stream. And again, when you're doing these events in person, I find this even more important because as you're kind of running around following the action, it can be really easy to get flustered or overwhelmed. But again, this is kind of like a cheat sheet that I think is ubiquitous across any platform. Whenever you're doing a live stream, I've always found it so helpful. And so it's a little bit small, but on the left, this is actually just like a one-pager that we had for an action with Movimiento Cosecha and Never Again Action. They were joining together to do this event. This is around in 2019 out front of the ICE building in Washington, D.C. And so there was thousands of people coming together to march and shut down the ICE building. And so because this was a joint action, there were going to be thousands of people, different kinds of calls to action, different messaging. We wanted to keep it clear, and especially around immigration, politics, Trump, the Dems, we wanted to make sure that folks had really clear talking points that they could always reference. And so at the top, there's these really great, just like brief things that everyone should know if they're live streaming. Hold it horizontal, have a caption ready. We had it copy and pasted, ready to go into their phone before they went live. Be engaging, friendly, and excited. We wanted to make sure that the live streamer understood that they weren't just there to hold the phone. They were there to keep the energy going. Repeat why you are here, what is happening, and any absorption or messaging constantly. You want to make sure your absorption is repeated verbally, that it's in the chat, that it's in the caption, all of these things. And then we also kept a few talking points, some hashtags, and some considerations. We wanted to make sure that the live streamer was somebody who was directly affected and impacted by the issue, but we didn't want them to get kind of bogged down in having to talk about deep understanding of policy, talking about the Dems' long history of false promises or anything like that. We wanted them to feel comfortable to tell their story and to reference the talking points and absorptions that we had listed below. And this was something they could print out and have with them. And we trained them and a backup live streamer so that they had a support person as they followed this march along, and went out and acted as the interviewer and pulled off what I thought was a really beautiful and amazing live stream. But it's only able to get that way through folks feeling supported and encouraged.
Yeah, and you mentioned, right, make it dynamic, right? We want to make sure that people feel engaged. You mentioned the 7 seconds. So you want to keep it dynamic, but also remember, you can share screen, you can share materials. So this is just an example, right? We talked about the childcare work that we're partnering with. Build Childcare Celebration was during our week of action from September 1st to the 8th. And at the end, we held a celebration because all the actions that happened around the country. And so here is just the beginning of the Zoom to Facebook Live, and just sharing a screen and letting people know as you're joining, right? Drop your name, drop where you are if you're a parent and provider. And it's also something you can do within the chat function within Zoom, but also in the comments on the Facebook Live. And so this was a way just to get people that were not able to join on the Zoom call, but still able to join on Facebook. People are always scrolling, right? So if they landed on this and were joining us, they were able to share their information and we can follow up with folks, right? If someone was a parent from a certain area, I'm working specifically in Florida. If someone's in Florida, reach out, hey, you're in Florida, let's chat, right? So there's ways that you can follow up with someone and move them up. So I might be like, let's move them to the Facebook group, right? Because we do have a Facebook group to engage people that are already interested. And then other ways to make it dynamic, get creative, right? Have y'all, like, drop in the chat if you've joined a really interesting Facebook Live or Instagram Live or just live, right? Earlier, Patricia was mentioning the Twitch Live with Among Us. There have been quite a few of those, right? So share in the chat if you've joined some interesting lives. I know I've joined some meditation lives, and just ways that I've met other people in my area that are doing similar work, right? And so ways you can do this, right? Strong storytelling, virtual rallies, and you can host organizational updates. At times people weren't able to jump on anymore on Zoom due to many other capabilities that I'll be sharing later on as well. But people were able to jump on their Facebook live stream and just drop some comments and engage and see each other's faces, right? And other things like that were just cultural moments, right? We are making sure that we're organizing people, but also people have many different interests and we have to focus on building a connection with folks. So sometimes that might look like a poetry reading. Sometimes that might look like just a community meeting, right? To enjoy each other's company in that space. And so what you can also do in making it dynamic is collaborate. In this Zoom live stream here, we were able to have many other guests join us. But when you live stream on Instagram, you can feature other organizational pages, other people, and people from around the world. A benefit from live streaming is that no matter where you are, you can join this live stream, right? If you have service, but you can join the live stream, right? So you can have guests from anywhere in different ways. And that's a way to keep it dynamic and also reach different audiences. So here we have an example, right, of in the top right corner, we have Antoinette with Miami Worker Center on a press conference. And this is a community member that was facing eviction and wanted to make sure that their voice was heard, but was not able to be on the ground anymore, right? An essential worker could not and did not want to come. And we weren't having community meetings at the time, at the beginning of the pandemic, due to the safety of our community. And so they still wanted to make sure that their voice was heard, right? This was unjust. They needed to be safe and they needed to be homed, right? And so this was a way for them to participate in a press conference and raise their voice and advocate for themselves publicly, right?
Yeah. And you'll see on like in a few slides, we're going to give another example of one of the childcare events that Britannia was able to host. But I think one of the main points in this too is just thinking about when you're trying to think as an organization, how do we want to represent our movement? How can I use this live stream to bring more people into our base and our movement? The answer to that isn't always by making it bigger and flashier. It's about kind of just letting your leaders lead and talk to their own communities. And one of the most powerful kind of live streams that I've been able to really see grow out is when leaders are just talking to other folks in their community and trying to bring them in. With Cosecha in the past, we had a live stream that happened every single week from different circles and folks in their New Jersey licenses campaign. And so what would happen is folks would go live and share updates of what was happening in their own cities and their own states, so that no matter where you were able to see the big picture and everyone was able to get updated. Because folks weren't able to join Zoom, folks were really excited to see the other leaders that they knew and trusted, folks from their own neighborhoods and communities going live. And with Britannia, she's a mother and a childcare provider. And so whenever we were thinking of, okay, who can be like the face of this event that we're going to host, trying to bring folks into the movement, conceptualize the political moment, we knew that it had to be another child care provider. It had to be a parent, because that would be who folks would be able to trust the most. The folks that people are already talking to, the most trusted person in the community. And so as we're thinking about like who is the face of our movement and who should be the person that we're training to fill these roles in these live streams, we always want to look into our base, because they're the folks that are going and doing these roles anyways.
Yeah. And we're going to we bring it back tomorrow, right? On Facebook Live, on his personal page, and just in the moment at this facility, right? Something that was really powerful is that there were so many live streams because it was happening at many facilities. And the people that were directly impacted and the people that directly knew what's going on were the people associates, right? The Amazon associates. So Mario had personal connections with many of his coworkers, and they all were engaging in this and wanted ways to share their stories. And some people really feel so comfortable sharing stories with someone you relate to the most and you work with. So Mario was able to go around and just talk with folks. People had their posters, as you see there, right, saying why they're demanding this shutdown. Other folks were interviewing, and Mario was able to share a firsthand experience of what was going on the ground, and also circling back right to the demands, the call to action, why this was personally important, and then also why it was important to his community, his family, his people, especially in the time of a pandemic.
Great. And something that I think is really special and important about kind of the transition that all of our movements have made towards centering live streams as a tactic has been that it's been in response to a moment where I think a lot of us have felt like our traditional tools are being kind of challenged. Like what we can do when we can bring folks into a room together is just so special. And it almost felt hard to kind of trust that step into like we can do the same things, but find a way to do it online. But I think that's something that's been important about that movement to like moving even Netroots online, moving all of these different kind of meetings online, is that it does allow for a certain level of accessibility that might not have been there before. And so even just logistically, if you're living in like even myself living in Massachusetts, there's a ton of events that are happening in Boston. There's a huge community out there that is organizing, that is making movements happen. But living 2 hours outside of the city in a more rural area, I'm not able to join that community as much as I would love to. But now that meetings are online, I'm able to be a part of different homes and movement homes that I might not have otherwise. But there's also a lot of considerations about how we make these online spaces even more accessible. And that's something that we really want to have be the norm in all of these live streams, and as something that we think more about and how we can push our movements to be more accessible in all of our spaces, both offline and online. And so some things that are capable through live streams that should really be the norm in more spaces are things like closed captioning, are things like having translation accessible, are having sign language accessible. And also, if there's other pieces of accessibility and considerations that folks should have in the way that our movements work online, and particularly through live streaming, I think this is also a space for learning that from each other as well. So if there's other kind of accessibility things to keep in mind and that y'all would like to see be the norm as well, definitely let us know and put those in the chat. And here there's a few examples, mainly from, I believe, the Working Families Party. So shout out to any WFP folks that are watching. But they've done a really excellent job, I think, of having sign language in almost all of their major live streams as something that is constantly on screen throughout the whole presentation. Here you'll see on the bottom one for this Care Can't Wait live stream, they actually had live transcription at the bottom. So they had captioning being added underneath as folks were talking. And I think in the caption of these live streams, which I unfortunately don't have screenshotted, there was a place to either view or call in so that you could get access to the same event, but with Spanish interpretation or multilingual interpretation. And so these are all just like very key pieces that as we're thinking about how to make our live streams bigger and better, we also need to be thinking about how we're making them more accessible. And then just a few more considerations for sort of the tools aspect of pulling off some of these live streams and events. Considerations for in-person live streams, and also some of these are kind of transferable to any sort of getting in front of the camera or live streaming and talking to an audience, is being ready to be a host. So this is something that it's actually really great to coach folks on. Having those talking points ready can be really important, but also being ready to share your experiences too, and to tie the moment into your own life can really help you relate to the folks who are watching. And that's also why we say it's so important for your live streams to be led by the leaders, because they're going to be the ones that are able to actually do that storytelling. There's a bunch of really amazing sessions throughout the 3 days of Netroots on storytelling and how to make impactful stories. And that's just really, I think, one of the golden pieces that you can't just get unless you really work with folks to build that muscle. And then for equipment, we're going to talk a little bit about equipment for these webinar style live streams. But a few folks usually ask about what type of equipment do I need if I'm going out and I'm doing a live stream in person, I'm doing a march or a rally. Some really important pieces are to have a good phone. It doesn't need to be the latest iPhone, anything flashy, just something that's stable and it's going to be reliable. A hotspot, especially if there's a crowd, because internet can be very spotty. Extra battery packs is always important. And then some considerations, if it's at night, think about all the different possibilities. Is it going to rain? Are you going to need an extra light source? And then something that's usually very helpful is having some sort of stabilizer, especially if you're doing a march, and investing in these tools once, and your org can use them for every live stream coming forward, is some sort of stabilizer so that when you have your live stream, you're not just holding it with your hand and your hand gets tired, but it's able to actually be stabilized and you're able to have it held up and you won't have a shaky live stream. But the most important thing is to really just be dynamic and be an interviewer. We saw earlier with some of the Amazon walkout videos, those were just run by people going live on their own personal accounts, just holding their phone, just talking straight to camera, and having it actually not be branded and not be flashy is actually really excellent. And we've seen time and time again that some of these unbranded, some of these just straight to camera live streams have actually outperformed some of our flashier and more high production value videos. But it really always depends on testing it and trying things out and the movement and base you're trying to reach.
Yeah, and so, it's all depending on your audience, but also one thing you can do in a really great practice that would really help prepare any members or leaders that you have leading these live streams is testing. You can really test on a lot of these platforms now, and it might be a really great to make people feel really comfortable to lead these moments on the ground or in the moment, right? So you can now test on Instagram. You could just press the practice and it'll test for you, right? And you can invite your folks to that live. On the Facebook, when you RSVP or when you make an event, right, create a live event within the Facebook platform, you can just make sure you put testing or test broadcast on the bottom right corner, right? And as Patricia mentioned earlier, right, I know a few people have done live streams in this chat or have watched. Have you share your roles in the chat or any best practices that you have witnessed or done yourself? As you can see, there are sharing screen capabilities right now. We are on a streaming platform, and there's just so many things that are already going on within these next 3 days. So go ahead and drop it in the chat. And if you've ever participated in these, just drop a me in the chat.
And
So
oh, go ahead.
All right, thanks. So we're going to talk about power building. I know we're talking about creating community through using this tool, live streaming. And so we're going to dive into a little bit about power building. Share in the chat ways that you have thought of ways that you've engaged members in live streams, either on behind the camera or right through viewership. So empower them to jump in. Live streams gives a way for leadership development as well as community storytelling. I know that was something that we mentioned in the beginning, was like really strong community storytelling is a way to engage your viewership, but also in the back end, empowering your members and your leaders to lead this movement on the other side of the camera. You can host trainings or skill shares to give your members and leaders the power and the tools to facilitate these live streams. It could also look like moderating, supporting, right? We mentioned a range of roles that people can participate in. So these are ways that people can engage with the work that you're doing, even if it's not in front of the camera, because some might not be prepared to do that, right? So you want to make sure that you're giving folks the capability to participate in a way they feel most comfortable, but still in a way that live stream and reaches many, many people. And through the way of community storytelling, it's a way for, like we mentioned with Mario, right? Sharing the story of self and the story of us, and on the ground at this facility, right? Raising his voice and helping raise other people's voices and showing them that this is a way that we can make our voices heard, even not just at this facility with Amazon, but through the internet, right? And so he was empowered and he felt ready to share his story and uplift others through live streaming.
And so again, thinking, how are we leading leaderfully, and how are we overlaying an organizing lens on all of these digital tools from start to finish in the whole process? We want to think about, how are we bringing our viewers into the movement? Again, how are we not just bringing folks into viewing our live stream, but then going from maybe seeing this on their timeline to actually joining in and getting deeper in with the movement? And so you want to think about absorption into your movement kind of in all of the places, and both outreach into your existing leadership or your existing base to bring them in and maybe reactivate them, plug them into what's going on, or using this as an opportunity to maybe list build or grow your list. One thing that's key is just thinking about the organizing steps from start to finish. How are you letting your base know about the live stream once you've decided you're going to do one? And so thinking about how this could be an opportunity for either reaching out or list building. If you are going to be doing an event on Zoom, or if you're going to be going live at a certain time, maybe you have an RSVP. This could be through Zoom, or you could be signing up to RSVP through any of your CRMs, letting folks know that we'll reach out to you when we go live. Monica talked earlier about being able to RSVP on Facebook. If your Facebook page is planning on going live, it basically creates an event out of it. It's something that is really important, is sending texts when you go live. So anyone who RSVP'd or signified interest, if you have folks kind of segmented by issue area, sending a text over a peer-to-peer messaging platform, such as the one on screen here, is a great way to get that boost of viewership. And also letting your folks know just like what is going on, letting them know about the latest things happening. And this also provides an opportunity as well to maybe have a back and forth conversation. A best practice might be to ask, like, hey, we're about to go live. Do you want to hear about it, or do you want the link? If they say yes, you send them the link. You can actually maybe engage in a conversation there, ask them what they thought of the event at the end of it, and move them to having a one-on-one conversation. And same for any folks that registered, thinking about how am I reaching out to them after the event to either update them on the next steps or ask them how they thought that it went. Thinking about during the event, some of the most important things that I've actually seen done wrong on live streams are just going live without a caption, without any absorption, especially when we're thinking that Facebook, there's only about a 3-second attention span. Like, how do we actually like get folks to like do that next step? If we're going live at an event that's happening, how do we get them to go to the follow-up meeting where we're going to talk about how we're going to replicate these actions across the country and get them plugged into planning a local action in their own community? Having a caption and a clear absorption into there is a great way to actually move folks into getting their name, their number, and reaching out to them and getting them like plugged into the next steps of your movement. And so something that also happens all the time is you might go live and forget to add your caption in, especially on Facebook. It's really easy to edit in the caption afterwards or during the live event. So that's just always something to think about and prep for. And then depending on the platform, folks might not be able to see the caption if they're viewing the live. And so always repeating verbally or having on screen the call to action and those next steps. When is your next meeting? How do you get involved? If this issue affects you, like what do we want you to do about it? So repeating that who, what, where, and why during the live stream verbally is really important. And then, like folks have said, like engaging is not always enough. So when folks are commenting on our live streams, we don't just want to leave those comments there. We want to be replying to them and DMing folks. There's a session yesterday on how to move folks into your DMs to have a one-on-one. And so how are you actually like responding to folks' comments? On Facebook, you have the ability to message them in their DMs within 7 days of them commenting if it's on Facebook, and moving that like simple comment into a one-on-one. So there's a lot of different tactics on how you can move folks, whether it's through driving comments, whether it's through posting a low bar ask, like a petition signature, which will be, you'll get a lot more like petition signatures from a live stream than you would maybe like phone calls, but it really does, again, depend. And how are you making sure that there's some sort of absorption or next step being shared constantly? But then once the action or event is done, you want to make sure that you are utilizing that moment and all of the energy that you drove into that live stream to actually move folks again back into your movement. So if folks are commenting on your live stream, you want to not just be engaging with them to like continue to boost like engagement. But for Kelly, for example, she messaged and said, wish we could organize a toddler march on Washington on one of our live stream events. And then here you'll see in this comment, they're asking, is this when is this next meeting going to happen? And so you're responding to them in the comments, but then we're also going to ensure that we actually reach out to Kelly, reach out to Salvadora, and actually have a conversation with them. Kelly, like I totally hear you. We need to take this action to the next level. We're actually having a planning meeting on Thursday. Can you make it? I'd love to share your ideas with other childcare providers like you so that we can talk about how we can keep on building this movement. And having a conversation like that, just based off of a comment, is going to keep those folks activated. If you had a registration or if you had a petition, any kind of list, making sure that you respond to folks who had RSVP'd or who had done that simple action of signing a petition within 24 hours of your live stream is going to really boost the amount of folks that actually reply back and engage back with you, and making sure that you're moving them to a next action. So if you're going to have a march or a rally, make sure you have an absorption call planned 2 or 3 days after, so that all of the energy that came up from that event gets funneled into absorption. So reminder, please follow up with folks, whether it's in the captions whether it's in the comments, whether it's folks that signaled interest in attending, but maybe they didn't actually attend. Any list that you build or create, make sure you follow up with them. And then also think about, how am I going to get my organizers these names and these folks? Making sure that you have a plan from the beginning, that your live stream is not just about getting your voice out there, but this live stream has an angle to it that's actually strategically going to help increase our engagement, increase like the folks signing, our lists, all of these things. And so we're going to actually just dive in really quickly. We did some examples, some best practices, and we're going to talk a little bit about some case studies from some specific live streams that we've both worked on and share a little bit more about what made them successful and maybe just some additional learnings to share out with y'all. And at the end, we'll have some question times for Q&A. And so if folks have any questions that have come up throughout this, drop them in the chat and we'll get to them after this next section.
Thanks, Patricia. And so, you know, a lot of these shifts at times came because, right, we didn't have other ways to gather. We didn't have other ways to share information. We didn't have other ways to connect with people. And so in the time of COVID, organizing shifted a little bit. People went online, people went digital, and sometimes text messaging or social posts weren't the way to go. People really still miss that in-person connection. People really miss seeing their organizer's face or their community member's face. And so in the time of COVID, working at Miami Worker Center, we were working with tenant folks as well as home care workers, and a lot of them were sharing a feeling of isolation, the amount of misinformation that was going around, even through WhatsApp groups, right? In all the areas that they were able to connect with people, it was a lot of misinformation and an overwhelming amount of panic. And usually when they felt those moments, they would be able to come to community meetings and gather and be in community with their folks and share, right? And gather what is false, what is true, right? Like where they can trust and where they can turn to get resources. And so people were just yearning for connection, familiarity, trusted information, and support. And they couldn't find those things without putting themselves in danger. And so one way was through live streams. I know we mentioned earlier that ways you can do this is organizational updates. We were hosting our monthly updates, making sure that we were sharing with people their resources or resources they get access to, resources that we were providing, but as well as like know your rights trainings. Through one-on-ones, we were getting a lot of feedback, and through conversations, we were understanding from people that like Zoom just wasn't enough sometimes. We had to shift to Zoom, and that way we were able to gather people online. And I know other people used WebEx or other organizations use Google Meets and things like that, and Skype. But sometimes it just wasn't enough because it provided extra difficulties for communities that did not have access to strong bandwidth or understanding the applications that people needed to download, right? And so there was the language barrier, there was the data or the Wi-Fi, technological capabilities to not having a smartphone or a camera phone. And so we had to look at other alternatives to engage our folks so they could still understand what was happening, still know that we were here for them, right? In case that this was moments that they were just not able to access, right? Like group chats or things like that, or other ways that they wanted to engage with other members. And so it was the turning point. Live streaming started to be a way that we were able to reach our folks. Facebook live streams, and even YouTube, because we had a few folks that did not feel that through privacy concerns were not able to engage on Facebook. And so through multi-platform streaming, we were able to engage our folks where they were, right? And then also provide moments where I think we hosted a few meditation moments, know your rights for home care workers, because they were still working in that moment. And we had to make sure that our community and they all knew what they could and could not do, right? And that would keep them safe, as well as tenant right work. We were doing a lot of tenant know your rights workshops. And this was a place where everybody could get together and discuss what they were going through, share experiences, and just know that they could still raise their voice, and seeing other comrades raise their voice. On the slide before this, we did have a housing caravan, and it was a request through our leaders. They wanted to show elected officials that many people were being threatened of eviction during a global pandemic, and so they wanted to hold a caravan. Recognizing that there are many barriers for other members, this live stream allowed people in other areas of Miami that were not able to be on the ground due to whatever reason might be, to still participate, to still engage, to share the petition that was going around, to tag elected officials, but also like let other people in their communities share this and let them know that this is a resource they can come to, and just witness their comrades on the ground sharing their experiences out loud and mobilizing.
Great. And I'm going to share a brief example from Childcare Changemakers, which is a like grassroots movement to build power with childcare providers and parents to win more funding for childcare. And this is Britannia B. She's a amazing mother of two very adorable twins and a home childcare provider. And there's been this funding fight for many months to win more funding through COVID relief and now reconciliation. And there was an action that came up right around the last COVID relief package, where this was a moment where we wanted to pull off a national day of action. We had been having weekly meetings with other childcare providers and parents, and folks were really frustrated. They wanted to do something to flex our power, to show their strength. They wanted to kind of get together. There was also partners involved. It was a really big kind of moment where before the end of the year, folks wanted to say kind of like enough is enough. But with the pandemic happening, with it being winter, there wasn't really the capacity to pull off a big in-person event or action. And so we came up with the idea of hosting a big online event using videos and testimonies from leaders and partners and having it be really driven by the base. And so what ended up coming out of this was a 3-hour like virtual live event that was hosted by an organizer and Britannia, a parent and provider. And they kind of held the space over those 3 hours. But the really beautiful part of this was that it wasn't just them talking to the camera for 3 hours. Again, this was something that we wanted to be really led by the base, and they wanted to participate in it, rightfully so. And so there was panels where it was all parents and providers from our base talking with each other about the state of childcare in this moment. It was a political kind of like analysis based on the lived experiences of other parents and providers. We got testimonies and stories sent to us from parents, providers, and other organizations across the country. And we turned it into this like big online virtual rally on Facebook so that it could be shared and kind of sent around widely. We were constantly sharing our calls to action, which were signing a petition and calling your legislator. So mixing it with a telethon and really just trying to have this show the spirit and energy of the leaders and kind of a culmination of all of the vision and the work that folks have been doing over many months. And why I share about this specific rally in particular too is because it was something that had a really high kind of production value. And it's something that I think a lot of folks are looking at. How do we replicate something where we can actually be really dynamic, having different graphics, different videos on, and still have it be led by leaders and not have to have it be like we're spending hours and days working on this like very like branded videos. And so while this is something that does take a lot of capacity, we wanted to also make sure that it was something that was accessible. And so just to share a little bit of the workload and how to pull off something like one of those like much longer, kind of bigger events, it's really all about the organization of it. And so sharing just some screenshots of our digital assets. And so what that basically means is we made sure we went out and we collected videos, calls to action, stories and testimonies from different parents and providers and organizations from across the country. And we just had them all lined up like from start to finish, exactly what we wanted to have played and when. And you'll see here, we even had some like call to action graphics, which we then played like in the middle of the like transitions between speakers or between videos or testimonies. And so it ended up being really beautiful because not only was it like sharing these organizing asks throughout, but it also wasn't just like talking to the camera. It was engaging with the chat and the comments and also moving folks who maybe had joined our movement only a few weeks or months ago and giving them an opportunity to actually step into a role and get into actually presenting or sharing their story or driving others to taking these calls to action throughout this event as well. And so something else that's really important if you're planning on trying to utilize some of these tools or tactics for your own types of live streaming, is just, again, making sure you have a script ready. This is going to have to be a lot more intense than that one-pager script we showed from earlier. We had it like kind of by the minute what we wanted to say. And while this was, again, a 180-minute live stream, this kind of thing can be done for a 30-minute live stream, for an hour-long live stream, for an end-of-year event. Thinking about what you do, and again, the energy you want to have, and what is the type of like organizing lens that you want to carry with it, will really influence like how you drive this out. And so if folks are interested in getting like any of these kind of sample materials for how do I put together a script like this, what type of like digital like videos or ways that we can collect stories from our leaders to share, how am I training my leaders to be able to take on some of these roles, feel free to email us and we can share some of that work. But the important thing about this kind of higher production value level of live streaming, there's like we saw, like holding a camera and just like having leaders talking to the public. And then there's actually orchestrating something that's a little bit more intense, something that has graphics, something that has branding. Just making sure that all of those tools are accessible to folks. The live streaming that we used for that Build Childcare Day of Action, or the virtual day of action for childcare, was StreamYard. And that platform ranges from free to only $39 a month. And if you're only going to do one event, then you only have to pay for 1 month. And then another similar platform to that is BeLive, that allows you to add branding, have multiple guests, using the chat, all of these features and tools, similar pricing scale, free to $37.50. And we were able to share this live stream on Facebook and on YouTube, again, thinking about where your audience is at. We've also seen a ton of folks using Zoom. You can either do meetings or webinars and share those onto other platforms. And then there's Restream, where we are right now as Netroots, where you can share it onto multiple different platforms. And the plans are a little bit more expensive, ranging from free to $41 a month. And so these are just some of like the tools that a lot of the different folks have used and really vetted, as being able to be like the first place where you can really try out and explore having these more dynamic live streams, so that you can kind of like put your like experiment with putting your face and your movement out there more, to hopefully be able to bring in like more lists of folks, engage people deeper, bring folks into the movement.
And the chat consolidation that Patricia mentioned with a few of these platforms is also super beneficial, right? When you're having these live streams, engaging with people that are talking to you through the chat is super helpful, because you can actually let them know, right? You are here, they are there, and you still see them. Sometimes just like engaging, right? We saw Amanda mention how a script is so helpful and makes the biggest difference through experience. We saw Ali mention, how do you move from engagement to community? And these are great questions, and seeing and having people know that you actually are seeing them, right? And engaging with those comments is another great way to then move them from the comment section to offline action, to Facebook groups, to signing petitions, to one-on-ones, to leaders, and to into spaces where our community are the ones making those decisions, right?
Great. Awesome. And so feel free to drop more questions in the chat as they come. And as more questions are coming in, I'll just go through to share if you're interested in learning anything more about online to offline strategies, or what we shared earlier in the presentation about kind of like this organizing pathway. We have a 3-day training coming up in October and November. And we have a newsletter that folks are able to get on to get some like potential like new best practices, tips and tricks, and kind of stay up to date with what all of our movements are doing. Again, here's our website, and our emails are in the chat. So love to hear if we'll peek in the chat now for any other questions.
And thank you, y'all. Like, questions are super beneficial. I did see just a few people share their experiences. Joshua saying this was so helpful. I saw hearts. We love hearts. Rain sharing that they've used Facebook Live before. So you can even just share experiences, right? Have you gone to the Capitol and shared a live stream? I see there's a question. What about
Yeah.
security? Would you advise against holding organizing committees with workers not yet in a union, or are there ways to encrypt and block from recordings?
Yeah. And so, especially with live streaming, especially like when you're putting something on Facebook, on Instagram, doing some of these lives, I hear digital security come up a lot, and that's super vital. And so, we might not want to be like live streaming some of our like deep organizing meetings where we're planning events, planning arrestable actions, talking about deep strategy that we want to really hold close to our chest. But when we're thinking about what is the amount we can give away, that share like we do want like our like this view of power to be shared widely. We do want like folks to feel like they are not alone. In childcare specifically, like it's a very isolated workforce where childcare providers like are working from their own homes and they don't have the same type of break room or camaraderie. And so being able to provide a central place to share those stories and experiences publicly, even if it's folks sharing that for the first time, is something that's really important. But um, uh, I would definitely say that being strategic about the types of live streams you do and what you do make public is, I think, can often be like a really special place for bringing more folks in.
I think
And
this also ties really well with like what Amanda mentioned, doing it within a Facebook group, right? If you have a closed Facebook group and you do something like this and you are very strong with who you let in to that group, I think that would be just fine, right? Making sure that you are very careful with who's within that group, making sure your membership questions are very strong. Amanda mentioned like streaming through a closed Facebook group, you're still able to do something like that and reach all the people in the group and they can actually look back at it. So just being really particular with where you share those live streams. And if they're even saved, right? Because you can have a live stream and then delete it, but you can save that video for yourself.
yeah. And for any tips with the algorithm, I think especially it's really just about the content. And I would say really focusing on strong storytelling and being captivating in the video is going to be more important than anything else. I would definitely say include like a caption and things like that. Um, uh, but reaching your fullest potential with the algorithm, um, I know that like groups are definitely being prioritized in their content, and yeah, just making sure that the the story that you're telling is captivating is really important. But
And I
yeah,
would say, that is something that, and I know we have 1 minute, but that is something that we have been testing a little bit here and there. That is very exciting to test to see kind of what works because, as you know, the algorithm is always changing and benefiting certain folks. So even within Facebook groups, you want to see if it goes higher than a social post. Through the experience that we've had, it's kind of equal for now, but you don't know if that might change. So just making sure that you're doing it in moments where your folks are on, right? Most of your folks are on or most involved, and then also tagging folks because sometimes you don't know what's popping up. So
all right. So we're going to be wrapping up, but some folks from O2O Strategy are going to be presenting tomorrow. Broke to Woke data. If you're interested, please sign up for our newsletter. Feel free to email us, and we hope that folks were able to gain some like further best practices from this session. I know I gained a lot just being able to be in this space with y'all. So enjoy the rest of your Netroots, and it's been great to be here with y'all.
thanks, y'all.